Welcome to Mary's Eclectic Interests. My name is Sue Ellen Zagrabelny, and I'm your host. Our guest today is Dan Kenney, a documentary filmmaker of One Day in August, Survivors of 35W Bridge Collapse. Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
How did you come to write this documentary and prepare this documentary?
Well, on August 1st, 2007, I was at a swimming pool, and after I got out of the pool, somebody said to me, did you hear what happened? The bridge collapsed. And I said, what are you talking about? And I thought, well, that's weird. But when I got home, I saw on what I thought was a local news broadcast, it turned out to be a national news broadcast. I saw all these images of the 35W bridge collapsing, and I thought, oh my goodness. Now, I was a journalism major at the University of Minnesota, and I was really interested in going there to see it firsthand. So the next day I went down to the site, and there was so many people and so many news people from all over the United States, all over the world, and I thought to myself, I should do a story on this. So I was thinking about doing a story on it, and I thought, well, maybe I'll put a book together. But then I got a little discouraged. I thought, well, I don't have any good pictures. I don't know if this is going to work. But then I got the idea of maybe doing a documentary. And so on the first anniversary of the 35W bridge collapse, they had a special event, and I went there specifically to try to meet people who were in the bridge collapse. And I remember I was walking behind Mayor Ryback and Governor Pawlenty. But afterwards, I tried to meet some of the bridge survivors, and I felt awkward. I thought, like, here I am, another news person trying to, get a story, and these people are really overcome with, what they went through the year before. But finally, I gave my card to this woman whose husband was in the collapse, and he was in the newspaper the next day, and the day after that, he called me and said, I would like to be in your documentary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I interviewed him. Me and a photographer went to interview him, and our jaws just dropped at what he was talking about and what he went through. So I thought, well, I got one interview. I'll try to get another interview. So I contacted an attorney that was dealing with some of the legal ramifications of the bridge collapse. And somebody contacted me back and said, sure, I was in the school bus when the bridge collapsed. I'd love to be in your documentary. So I interviewed her. And then I thought, well, I'll try to get an interview with Mayor Ryback, Minneapolis Mayor Ryback. And I just had an incredible interview with him and what he went through. And then I thought, well, I'm starting to get interviews. I don't have any pictures. So I went to talk to the people at the Minnesota Daily because they had pictures of right after the bridge collapsed. And I got a contract with them, so I started collecting pictures, and I had these 3 interviews, and so I had the beginnings of a documentary.
What possessed you to invest your time and money into this documentary?
Well, I remember talking to the mayor and interviewing him, and at that time I was thinking maybe I'll just do a short film. But he started to go into details of what he went through and what he saw. And at that point I realized, wow, what a story. So as I was saying, after I interviewed him and the 2 other bridge survivors, on the second anniversary of the 35W bridge collapse, I had a screening at the Riverview Theater.
Okay.
And I interviewed, and I invited other bridge survivors. And so this is really how it took off. Okay. So I had just a short film. I had Mayor Ryback and 2 bridge survivors. I was screening it on the second anniversary of the 35W bridge collapse. Had reporters from WCCO television come, and because a lot of bridge survivors came, and they saw it, and they started approaching me, and that's when more of them wanted to become involved. They said, wow, I want to be in your film. I want to be in your film. So I started holding this every anniversary. I continued to show screenings, and more bridge survivors became part of the film. And so the movie just got bigger and had pictures from this Minneapolis, from the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Daily. And then I even had somebody from out of town call a news station and say, hey, I want to be in it too. So after the first few screenings, it became a tradition to show it every August 1st. So there was always news people and bridge survivors coming. And so then I got to the point where there are 15 bridge survivors sharing their stories.
How did you tackle that? How did you take on something that was so complex?
Well, I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
Okay.
I didn't at first understand the scope of what I was doing. Going from the idea of making a short film to it got to be over 2 hours. I didn't realize at the time how much time it would take and how much it would cost. So there were times when I got discouraged. I had an interview on KTIS radio talking about it, and then after we were off the air, I told Pam Lundell from KTIS, I said, you know, it's been an exciting project, but it's really, the funding has been a problem. And so she said, why don't you try Kickstarter? And so I put a 5-minute movie trailer on Kickstarter, and it was also on YouTube, and I had so many responses of people saying, gosh, what an incredible film. But not very many people wanted to support it financially. So I got a little bit discouraged, well, a lot discouraged, because it's been taking me a lot of time and costing a lot of money, and I wasn't getting a lot of financial support. So very discouraged. And then a friend of mine, he's a person of faith like myself, and he said, just pray, trust God, it'll work out. And a few days later, somebody who came to see the film gave $5,000 to the film. And then I was able to get news footage. And so now I have 15 bridge survivors, Mayor Ryback, a few others, not only pictures, but now I started to collect news footage from WCCO, Eyewitness News, and Fox 9. You know, I had to arrange a contract. So that made the film like, wow, so they're talking about it. You know, the bridge survivors are talking about their experience, and they have pictures showing them, as they're talking about their experience, there's pictures showing what they look like right like a few minutes after the bridge collapsed. And now I've got news footage that's showing them. One of the guys, the screenings have been really popular with news people and bridge survivors.
How did you go about contacting and convincing people to appear on your documentary?
Oh, after my first screening, I didn't have to look for them. They came to me. Oh. See, the first screening, it was at the 2nd anniversary of the bridge collapse. I almost didn't have to do anything. From that point on, news people, mostly local, some national, came after me. People who were bridge survivors looked for me. Like I said, the one woman from Wisconsin, she called the studio, WCCO, and said, can I get in there? I had no trouble. I had to finally say, okay, we've got enough. I can't, you know, it's getting too long. But it was that first screening that just was the catalyst. So many people started to get interested then. And one year, I think it was the 4th anniversary, we had about a 4th or a 1/3 of the people who were on the bridge when it collapsed came to the theaters, the Grandview Theater in St. Paul. And there were 3 news stations. And it was just like, again, it became really popular with bridge survivors and the news media.
Could you share some of the stories of the bridge survivors? Is there any particular ones that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah, they're incredible stories. The first guy interviewed, Andy Gannon, he wasn't severely injured, but as soon as he got out of his car, people were yelling at the school bus, because there was a school bus that went down. And they were saying, come help us. And so he went over there, but he noticed that there was a Tasty Bread truck right near the school bus, so he went over to try to help that gentleman. And there's things I just can't share.
Okay.
I mean, the film's really intense, but in respect for some of the families who lost loved ones, there's parts of the film I had to take out because it's just too hard to take.
Okay.
It's too intense, and I just didn't. I wanted to protect them and not let them have to see that part of it. The story I shared on KTIS radio was Omar from Texas. He was in town on business, and big, strong guy from Texas, and he was going across a bridge, and then it just went, and he just screamed. I mean, this is this big, tough guy. He was just so scared, and his car, when his car hit, it started filling up with water, and he couldn't get out of his car. The water started coming up, you know, to the windshield, and he pounded it and couldn't get out. And so it's like, what do I do? There was when he was on the phone when his car fell, and there was his friend, his mother is a pastor, and so she started praying for him, that angels would help him. So here he is, his water's starting to fill up, he can't get through the window. I mean, so finally he hits the back window and he swims out of the car, barely escaping. He swims out of the car, and he gets on top of his car and he realizes, wow, I'm surrounded, there's water all around me. What am I going to do now? And there was a bridge survivor with a 2x4, you know, on part of the bridge. You know, so he swam, and there was gas in the water. He had gashes, and it was really hurting his skin because there was this oil from an oil spill from one of the trucks that was in the water. But the guy pulled him out of the water with a 2x4. And it's like, wow. So there's actually a picture of that, and then I have some news footage that shows those two together right after he came out of the water. It's like, wow.
Oh, that's intense.
There's another woman who, this is the one from Wisconsin. She was with her boyfriend driving, and all of a sudden they felt a little shaky, and then all of a sudden they fell about 40 feet or so, and they thought, oh, I guess, wow, that was scary. Then all of a sudden they tumbled, and their car went completely underwater. They were completely immersed. So here she is, the car is full of water, they're completely underwater, and she's like, okay, what do I do now? God help me. And she couldn't get out, and she did finally get out, and she swam to the surface, and she was wondering, where's her boyfriend? And then her daughter was in the hospital, but there was a blanket of her daughter's that came up to the surface, and when she saw that, she thought, oh, I think things are going to be fine. And then finally he came up, and they got on the middle part of the bridge and tried to help others. And then we have pictures of them, you know, right after they came out of the water.
You talked a little bit about financial barriers of putting this documentary together. Were there other barriers that you had to overcome?
Well, starting the project, I never realized how long it would take to finish, and there's still parts of it I need to polish up. Part of it is like I had to stop because of not having enough funding. The time element, it took a lot of time. So there was times when I felt like quitting. But like I shared before, a friend of mine prayed with me and said, just trust God. And then, the retired doctor gave $5,000, which made it possible for me to get the news footage.
Can you talk a little more in detail of how you were able to get that news footage? You got the funding, obviously.
The nicest people, Fox 9 News, I'll just say that plainly. They were the most helpful. You know, they didn't charge, but all the other stations were charging quite a lot of money. That's why I needed the money to get the news footage. You know, it's over $1,000 per minute. I mean, it gets really expensive.
Oh my goodness.
So, so then got some good footage from Fox 9 and Eyewitness News and WCCO. CARE 11, you know, they've come to my screenings, but to use footage, it was just way too expensive, and I already had enough footage, so I didn't use any from them.
Okay, okay. What about distribution issues for getting your documentary shown?
I've shown it on every anniversary in the Minneapolis area, either like at the Riverview Theater, the Grandview Theater. We showed it one year at the Guthrie Theater, but I've never quite finished it. Again, it's like I need a little more money and just a little more time to polish it up, and then we want to get it into some film festivals and show it in other locations, because it's an incredible story.
You alluded to the fact that it's not quite finished.
Yeah.
Money is part of it,
Yeah.
but what else? What is it that
Well,
isn't finished?
It's really funny. You know, I start out with just a short film, and then I just get it just became so popular with media and bridge survivors that it got so big. So now I'm trying to cut it down and make it a little shorter. It actually got, I think, too long. And so we need to polish it off. There's some technical issues I have to deal with. You know, sometimes the sound is too loud, sometimes it's not loud enough, and so to try to equalize that. Some of the images when you show them in a movie theater, they're a little bit blurry, you know. So there's some issues. There's some music we're putting in, some music. So there's just some things we need to touch up to finish it, and it'll cost a little bit. I'm also, and this costs money too, there's a couple of pictures from the Star and Tribune that I want to use, but they need some money for it, so.
So there are some issues, but not insurmountable, do you think?
It'll work out somehow. I mean, I've come quite a long ways. It's taken a lot longer than I thought it would, but I'm sure it'll work out.
Do you have any advice for those starting out, embarking on a documentary career?
Yes.
What would you tell them?
Make a lot of money before you start.
Okay.
I mean, getting into it, the time and the money is painful. And, you know, and also something else is that get people to help you. Hopefully you can. It's easier, like you can see here, to have a crew instead of doing it all by yourself. I did all the editing myself. I've hired on some interns to help with videography and photography, but I didn't realize what I was getting into, and just if you have good planning, good financial backing, it'll go smoother. But one thing that's unique about this project is not every project gets so much media attention. It's been every screening I've had has local TV stations. It's been in the newspapers. It's been on radio, and I even got calls from somebody working on a show from NBC, and then of course, like I said, you know, PBS from New York City called me. So there's a uniqueness about this story that gets more publicity than a lot of stories. And
what's in the pipeline for you? What future projects are you working on?
I'd like to get to that, but there's one thing I wanted to share. The film is so intense, and one thing, I have a few things here. I just remembered something.
Go for it.
The perspective is from the bridge survivors. almost completely from the bridge survivors, except for Mayor Ryback and a few others. But so, like in one of the screenings, you know, as the bridge survivors share their stories and you see the images on the screen, somebody said to me, you can feel what they felt. And so one time, more than one time, but I remember one time in particular at one of the screenings, I think it was at the Riverview Theater, when the film was over, there was about 5 minutes or so of this silence, and you could hear some weeping. Because what's unique about this film is, from the perspective of the bridge survivors, feeling what they felt and seeing the images of what they describe, it's almost like you're there experiencing it yourself, but being so intense, I had to get a few humorous moments.
Okay.
And one of the stories, one of the bridge survivors, he was going across the bridge, and his car didn't go in the water, but it was on a center part of the bridge that went down. So after he went down, you know, he was still conscious. Finally gets out of his car, and he calls his fiance, and he says, I'm going to be late for dinner. And she said, you know, now why? She was kind of irritated with him. Now why? And he said, well, the bridge collapsed. She said, what bridge? He said, well, the 35W bridge. And she said, I don't see anything on the TV. I don't see anything on the news about it. He said, well, just wait a little bit. You probably will. A few minutes later, there was a helicopter, I think, from Channel 5. And the videographer zoomed in on him as he was talking to her on the phone. And she said, she was watching TV, and she said, oh my God, I can see you on the TV.
Oh my goodness.
So, wow.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So we have that now in the film too. I have the news footage that shows, it doesn't show a close-up of him, but it shows, he actually said, oh yeah, I'm there. She talks about it, and we actually have some footage of him walking on the center part of the bridge.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that question that I started to ask. What future projects are you?
Oh, one more thing, and I get to
Oh,
that.
one more thing. Perfect.
This documentary is so unique. I had somebody working on a project for NBC. They called me up and they came to talk with me, and they wanted to look over my film. And they actually started doing this is a national show. They started doing a reenactment of the 35W bridge collapse, and it was kind of fake. You know, it wasn't real. But with my documentary, it's real. It just goes to a deeper level because it's not a reenactment. They're talking about what really happened to them, and there's pictures and video that actually show it. So, incredible story, absolutely incredible. When I was first editing it, it was so intense that I cried almost every time as I was working on it, because they thought, so many times they thought they were going to die, and they talked about the terror of just fall. I mean, how many times do you fall into a river? It doesn't happen very often.
Thank God.
So they were just, the terror they went through, but then the beauty, one of the most beautiful things about this film is how there's a group of them got together as friends, and they became friends. It's almost like war buddies, you know, and they helped one another heal. There's an organization, you know, what's the organization called? You know, you can, my 5-minute movie trailer, it shows that at the end, you know.
Okay.
Where one of the bridge survivors talking about, you know, it was really a difficult thing. But I met a lot of really nice people, and I just thank them so much for being there for me.
Would you like to talk about any future projects you're working on?
Yeah, I'm working on a new project. I have a tendency to work on these really big projects.
Okay.
Started as a book. It's called A Nation Divided, a conversation with Democrats and Republicans. And as I say, I'll be interviewing people from the far left to the far right to the far out, and looking at the purpose of the book, and now it's also going to be a documentary, is to bring the art of listening back to our country. Our country's become so divided that people were not even listening to one another. So I've already starting a pre-book tour, and there's a lot of people interested in being interviewed, and it's a timely documentary and book for our time.
What would you like to add? What
yeah.
haven't we talked about?
Well, see, I was a broadcast journalism major at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
And when I think about it, I should have worked for a news organization, but I started Integrity Pictures. And what's unique about Integrity Pictures, it's about storytelling, but it's wisdom and healing through stories. And so as you can see, these stories I've worked on, the one on the bridge collapse, the one on our how our nation's divided, it's stories that bring wisdom and healing. So it's not just telling about what's happened to people, it's like something we can learn from their story. Like there's many lessons, but one of the lessons from the 35W bridge collapse is we should make sure we take better care of our infrastructure. Look what can happen if we don't take care of our bridges and roads. And, I mean, we think potholes are bad. I mean, bridges collapsing are even a lot worse than that.
Oh, absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, one of the interesting things is I have this tradition that I started. I show the film every August 1st on the anniversary of the bridge collapse. And I didn't expect that I'd be doing it so long, but one of the benefits of it is that survivors who haven't seen each other for a while get to see how everybody's doing. It's a special community. I remember the name. It's called Survivor Resources. That's the organization, and I interviewed somebody from Survivor Resources. They're the ones that help to bring healing and help to build friendships among the survivors. Yeah. So I'm going to be honest. I want to talk to people who want to work in media and who want to be independent filmmakers. It's a more difficult life. I'll tell you, it's easier to work for somebody, but there's nothing as satisfying as putting a story together and meeting all these interesting people. It's just so satisfying. You can't always get that if you're working for somebody else.
Thank you for sharing your story and the story of the bridge survivors with our viewers.
Yeah.
And thank you, Dan Kenney. And this is Mary's Eclectic Interests. I'm your host, Sue Ellen Zagrabelny, and we are happy that you joined us today.